This is back to Big 12 football. I think a pretty shocking summary and prediction of the league in 2025. I certainly was very, very, very surprised by it. And I'm left wondering, like, okay, so is this just everybody thinks the Big 12 is going to be wild every single year, so they'll take a stab at a random prediction? Or is this more along the lines of we all overreacted to year one of the Big 12 and buried a program that is probably going to be there quite often in the end? Those would be the questions that I would ask here about a couple of the predictions that I have seen. One of them maybe not as wild, and maybe we start with that, not the totally, totally wild one. That is FanDuel releasing their odds for the 2025 Big 12 championship. And I have also seen this in the form of college football playoff odds, like college football playoff championship odds. I think it's a little more interesting and a little more palatable for everybody when we can look at every single team here that FanDuel has for their Big 12 conference championship game winner in 2025. I got to admit, I said this the other day, guys. I was surprised at some of the hype that K-State was getting. And man, K-State tied with Arizona State here for best odds to win the Big 12 next year. I do get it. Like, there was a lot of offseason hype for Avery Johnson last year. And while he was not like Heisman candidate guy that, for instance, the New York Post had pegged him as, he was still one of the most productive quarterbacks in his class and still obviously has a very high ceiling. I think people really believe in Chris Kleiman, and he certainly has a high floor. And K-State had a pretty nice, under the radar, but pretty nice transfer portal haul, I would say. I'd probably give it like a BB plus. So I think they supplemented their team pretty well. Sam Leavitt is getting a lot of hype already for Arizona State. I would expect them to be there and get some respect after what they did last season, even while losing Cam Scadaboo. I've been pleasantly surprised, frankly, by the respect that I've seen for Sam Leavitt. I've seen him in the top 5 of like 3 or 4 lists of the top 10 quarterbacks in college football in 2025, one of which had him at number 1, which I know they got a lot of pushback on, but even that, seeing like, all right, like somebody, that's respect for the Big 12, man. If they think Sam Leavitt is worthy enough of being put there at the very top of the list, but he seems like a consensus top 5 quarterback in college football next year, which would certainly warrant Arizona State being toward the top, if not at the top of Big 12 favorites. More respect for BYU here, being in that second group with the plus 700 mark there. And this is outside of K-State, a lot more what I expected to see. I would have expected Iowa State, Texas Tech, Baylor, BYU, Arizona State really to be in that top group. I don't know that I would have had Kansas quite up there, but with maintaining Jalen Daniels, and if you just figure they're going to get better luck in close games this year, I can understand why you'd still have Kansas in that group. I'm a little surprised by K-State being so high, a little surprised by Kansas being so high, a little surprised by Iowa State being a plus 1,000, which would give you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They'd be the seventh best odds in the Big 12 there. That feels like some Cyclone disrespect. They're still going to have a lot coming back, and Matt Campbell seems to have really righted the ship and turned things back around there. So Cyclone fans, I'm sticking up for you on that. In fact, if I were looking at this and thinking like, all right, what's the best value there? Boy, Iowa State, or like maybe if you really wanted to take a stab, Colorado or Utah. Now with Utah, speaking of the Utes, everybody, this is the real surprise from all of this. ESPN, behind a paywall, ESPN Plus, they did projections for next year, and it was not just a top 25, not just, they went deeper than, hey, this is our way too early top 25. It was, here's who we project to win each conference, and here's who we would have in the college football playoff. And I will start with some good news. They had the Big 12 champion as the 3 seed in the college football playoff. They did have that team losing to number 2 Penn State and Jim Knowles and his very highly paid defensive coordinator, but it was in the semifinals. Had Penn State over the number 3 team in the playoff, which was the Big 12 champion, who I will reveal in just a moment. in the Fiesta Bowl in the semifinals. So a lot of Big 12 respect there. No dealing with, hey, will they even be the 4 seed? Is Boise or Tulane somebody going to jump them? No, they get to 3 and they're going to the semis. They're actually winning a quarterfinal game this time. Respect, ESPN, respect. But what will shock a lot of you is who they actually had doing that, because ESPN had the Big 12 champion as, drum roll, Utah. They had Utah winning the Big 12. So if you are in any way a believer in ESPN, which I imagine that many on this channel are not, but if you're in any way a believer in ESPN, go get that plus 1,900 on Utah right now to win the Big 12 next year. That seems like some pretty damn good value. Pretty good value there if you want that. Just friendly little tip. I'm not a betting guy at all, but a friendly little tip there. Because I do think, like, is that a part of the ceiling for Utah next year? I would tell you absolutely yes, just because of the program DNA that they have. Like, that they're going to have a defense. They will have a defense. They had a top 20 defense last year. In fact, I can read you what ESPN said about this. Despite collapsing offensively, the Utes still boasted a top 20 defense per S&P Plus. That's Bill Connolly's SP Plus, and lost 5 games by a total of 23 points. That's like roughly 4 points a game. They'll have a chance to charge right back up the standings. All they need is to find a QB1, probably New Mexico transfer Devin Dampier, who I do like. I think that was a really nice poll. And it's fair. Like, quarterback injuries have completely crushed things the last couple of years. It's made the offense very helter-skelter and kept them from getting much footing. And then they lost a bunch of close games and still had a good defense. The general Big 12 part of the paragraph that ESPN wrote here talked about they flipped all the close games around and had Kansas and Utah pretty high up because they both struggled in those close games last year and figured that luck would change. That's kind of a Phil Steelian type of philosophy. You'll see that with Phil Steele a lot in the way that he projects teams. Like, some of that, turnovers could be luck based, and if that flips around the next year, that may change. Like, close games felt like a similar sort of philosophy to me there. So I got to be honest. Like, I know that we all, speaking of like SEC, came back and bowed at the altar of the SEC when a lot of times we'll get a lot of hate around here. Utah has not always been the most popular school in the world, program in the world around here, but I do have to admit, as much as last year there was some level of satisfaction just with the mob of Utah internet fans that had crapped on the conference the whole time in watching Utah win 5 games last year, I was still somebody, and I've said this before on the channel, I would tell you, there's absolutely a chance that they could turn it right back around next year. It's too good of a program with too good of a coach, and that stuff hasn't left. Like, that championship DNA has not left. So, yes, do I think that they could do it? For sure. If Dampier, if they hit on him as a quarterback and he stays healthy, they will have a good defense. The Big 12 is wild. Last year, Arizona State at this time last year, think about all the teams we were talking about. Not a single one was Arizona State. They not only won the league, they came within one play of beating Texas in the college football playoff to go to the semifinal. We truly have no idea. I really honestly respect that pick from ESPN and feel like it's probably the right way to go, man. If you're going to take a flyer on somebody lower down toward the bottom of the league, because this is the wild, zany league, as much as we would have wanted to fight against that perception and hope that wouldn't be the case, through 1 year of this new Big 12, that's what it looks like it is. Makes a lot of sense to go with Utah, quite frankly. They're toward the bottom of the league. So something to think about, little football for you in January.